welcome to week 3. So what we're going to cover in today's session is we're going to look at preparation and tips. We're going to look at what your education has taught you, looking at your work history. We'll have a little break. Then we're going to go on to, is this the place for you? Then we're going to look at the personal touch sort of questions. And then we're going to look at what competency-based questions are. And then we'll have a little questions, a little break, and we'll recap at the end. So, hello, I'm Daryl. I am your work coach for today. I will, like I said, we're going to be looking at interview part 1, so we're looking at some questions. I've got, I have a work history of working in HR, and it's lovely to meet you. So before we start, just when you have a little think about what you want out of today's session, sort of think about what sort of, interview questions that you've struggled with in the past, or maybe is there a certain type of question that you're not sure how to answer, or you're not sure how to get across your exam results, or maybe your volunteering work. Keep that in mind when you're watching today's session. And then finally, have you ever had a job interview before? What did you think went well? What didn't go well? What would you like to improve upon? What sort of questions do you have? Keep those in mind for today. So first and foremost, preparation. It's really important when obviously you have an interview to do your research. You can't just turn up and hope for the best and wing it. That's not good. So you need to research the appropriate information. You need to prepare yourself mentally, and you need to anticipate any questions you're likely to be asked. And you need to work, and when you've got all this, you've got to work out the best possible answers to those sorts of questions. So basic stuff, pretty obvious, but in case it's, in case it's not, that's what you've got to do. And that's how you can put yourself in the best position when it comes to having an interview. Okay, so this would be a great chance for you to pause if you're watching this at home. A little task for you to do. So the below chart will help you organise information about your employment history and for you to become familiar with it. It can also double up to help you formulate your CV or complete an application form. So what's really great about this is it's just a way, it's so easy to go into interviews or when you're doing your CV to forget what you've done or any previous experience, where it's easy to forget. I do it all the time, and this is just something I do for an interview to help just prep myself and remind myself of what I need to know. Now, of course, if you're at school, you might not have a previous job. So instead of putting current job or previous job, etc., what you could do is you could put, if you volunteer, for example, I've helped out at the drama club, or if you are part of a debating team, or if you volunteer at a local charity, or if you do anything in your volunteering based work, feel free to put those in. Again, what have you learned when you've been doing that activity, what you feel you've achieved, and what you found difficult. This is just a really great way for you to organise your thoughts, to have it very clear on a piece of paper, and also to start really planning out how you might answer some interview questions. So what we're going to do here is the following example. So we're going to look at examples of interview questions that you might get. Of course, these aren't, written in stone. These questions might vary. There's many different ways to ask a question. But most importantly, the following examples aren't to be learnt as a script. So where I've written an example or there's an example answer, you need to adapt it so it works for you. This is merely examples to show you how to answer them. You can maybe take ideas, but like I said, they're not to be learnt as a script. You've got to adapt them and make them work for you. You can raise your confidence by becoming so familiar with any likely areas of questioning in an interview that you are unlikely to be caught unawares. This is a really great piece of advice. Most interviews will be asking you very similar questions. They'll want to know your work history. They'll want to know a bit about you. They'll want to know about your education. So if you just become familiar with the sorts of questions they will ask, you can become well practice your answer. Again, it will make you more confident. You'll be very familiar with your own answers. And again, it will just make interviewing so much easier. Use examples from work situations, leisure, voluntary activities, your education or home life. You don't just have to have, examples from work. You can make examples and where you've worked in your life adapted to any sort of situation, you can give as an answer. Last but not least, just one more tip is always answer questions fully. No yes or no answers. For example, if someone says, do you like your current job? You don't answer, yes, I do, or no, I don't. You answer like, yes, what I really enjoy is this aspect of my job is getting to work in a team. You never, ever, ever want to give a yes or no answer. So a little tip that I usually give, and I've used in the past when I've taught other people, is when you're giving an answer, if you only feel like you've come up with one sentence, ask yourself why or because, For example, do you like your current job? Yes, I do. Why do you like your current job? Well, I really like it because I get to work as a team. That is how you answer a question fully. So if you find yourself that, you think your answer is a bit short, just, ask yourself why. If you can't remember to do that, just remember to follow the yellow brick road because that is your best friend and the best way to fully develop your answers. Okay. So another key bit of advice before we do crack on and look at some of these questions is you must listen carefully before you say anything. You have to actually make sure you've actually listened to the question, okay? So a few tips to make sure that you are listening and not, hearing what you want to hear. You need to concentrate. Don't let your nerves stop you hearing what is being said. Again, I know it can be easier said than done, but if you make sure that you're confident and do the preparation, try and get your nerves under control so you can actually fully concentrate and fully hear what the person is asking you. Listen carefully to what is being asked rather like read an exam question before you put pen to paper. What I mean by this is, you're told before you answer an exam question, you've got to read the question carefully, make sure you've understood it and you're answering the right question, because there's nothing worse before you're halfway through an answer, realize you've misread it and you've answered a completely wrong question. So in exactly the same way, listen carefully to what is being asked. Don't just hear what you want to hear. Don't interrupt your questioner. Again, you think it's obvious, but again, we've all done it. I know I've done it. Sometimes if they're taking a long time to say something, you're like, okay, I've got what you're asking me. I'm gonna answer now. Just let them finish their thought. Let them finish their questions. Remember to smile and just don't interrupt. It looks kind of rude and shows that you've not really been listening. Show that you are listening actively, but ask appropriate questions to help the conversation along. So again, smile, nod, lots of yes, indicate that you're listening. Smile and nod in all the right places, as I like to say. And again, you might want to ask questions at certain stages, so that'll be really important. Last but not least, understand your interviewer's point of view, preferably without suggesting they would benefit from counselling or therapy. Again, you never know. If your questioner is, saying something and you're like, what? I don't understand why you're asking me that. What is wrong with you? Don't say that. Just try to understand their point of view. They're trying to get certain information out of you and to understand your work history. So don't be rude, suggest that they're crazy or anything like that. So again, you'll be surprised at how many people have done that in the past. Okay, so the first sort of questions we're going to look at are questions that an interviewer will ask around your education. So what has your education taught you? Now, before we start looking at some, just a few things. Be aware that not all recruiters are au fait with the many different titles of qualifications. List of initials may not mean much, what your course covered, and what you will do. So basically, for example, most people will know GCSEs, but like most recruiters might not know what a NVQ is, or a BTEC, or an IB. There's so many qualifications out there. So maybe what you can do is just sort of highlight, I did an IB in X and X and X, and I've done French history, etc. Just really make it clear what your education is. Very important, know your exam results. This is something even I do before interviews now. I always have a quick look at my CV, or, just to refresh my memory exactly what I got in what subjects, because, you never know. In a couple of years' time, you'll be surprised at how easy it is to forget what you actually got. So just refresh your memory. This is another important one, but, you know, it's more of a case of being prepared. Know where your certificates are. Look, an interviewer is probably not going to ask to see them, but better prepared than not. If you want a teacher or tutor or a lecturer to be a referee, ask in advance if they'll be, as they'll be more likely to say nice things about you. So this is really important. For example, you know, you're not going to have any work history, so you might need a teacher or a tutor or someone to say that yes, this person has done this. So just give them lots of time to write a reference for you, because again, teachers are very busy, and they're more likely to say something nice about you if you ask them well in advance. So right, we're looking at education first, and we're sort of now going to look at some questions that are aimed sort of for if you know you've just finished school or just sort of finished like GCSE levels. GCSE or A level, I believe. Okay, so which subjects were you good at? So again, have a little think how you might answer this question. And again, we'll look at the answer that I've written. Think about what works for it, what doesn't work. Also think of how you could adapt it for you. And remember, when you're answering this question, just don't think, oh yes, well, I was really good at art and, you know, English. Remember, because, follow that yellow brick road. Why was you, you know, why did you like those subjects? Why were you good at them? So here is my answer. I got best results in science and maths. We had really good teachers in those subjects, but I don't think that they are the subjects I'm interested in using at work. Although I know maths will always be useful, I did fairly well in most subjects, though, rather than having one that was much better than the rest. So, you know, they've answered the question. I got best results in science and maths, but why? Because we had some really good teachers in those subjects. And then this, you know, this answer sort of goes on to say, you know, why I'm interested in using these in work, etc., etc., etc. So remember, don't just give like that yes and no one sentence answer. Always ask why, because why have I said this? Were there any subjects you weren't very good at? Okay, this can be a tricky one. So when you do get a question that might have to lead to not a negative answer, but you know, it's not as, you know, as positive as it could be, always try and spin those sort of negative like answers to a positive. So for example, here I said, was there any subjects you weren't good at? And I've put languages. I took French and German, but I found them tricky. I wanted to do well in maths and English and science, and that has paid off as I passed all these with good exam results. So can you see how we've turned this? Was there anything you wasn't very good at? And we've turned it into a positive. Yes, I wasn't very good at this. I found them hard, but I want to do well in these areas, and you can see that's paid off with my good results. So again, you're ending it on a positive. You're saying, actually, well, I might not have been very good at French and German, but I was really good at maths, English, and science. What made you choose an NVQ in catering rather than opting for A-levels? So here, again, think about how you might answer this question. But here we've got the answer. I was keen to stay on at school, but I much preferred the idea of doing something that trained me for a particular career rather than something open-ended like A-levels. I had a Saturday job in a cafe, and I enjoyed dealing with customers and with food, and I thought this GNVQ pardon me, would help me qualify as a chef in the longer term. Again, see what works for this. Sort of explaining about why they've opted for something a bit more vocational rather than A-levels. This is something you could use if you want to look at apprenticeships as well, so sort of keep that in mind. And sort of, you know, this question sort of answers, you know, what I'm covering in this GMVQ, why I preferred it to A-levels. So that's, if you see a question like that, it can stump you a bit, you know, oh, why have you done this rather than A-levels? But don't let that put you off, don't let that get you down. Just say, well, I was keen to stay on at school, but this is my idea. I'd rather have something that actually trained me for work rather than saying, oh, good level, like A-levels. So again, think about how to turn those, not necessarily negative, but switching it to the positive. Okay, so these questions are looking for more like after college / A-levels questions. So the first one we're going to look at is, how did you choose which university to go to? Again, have a quick think how you might answer this. What I will say before we look at the question is be personal, okay? Everyone could have the scripted standard answer of, oh, I chose to go to Oxford because it is one of the best universities there is. Everyone is going to pick that answer. What you want to demonstrate is how you're different and how you stand out. And so maybe just dig up, you don't have to go too personal, but why did you choose to go to Oxford? Well, actually, I fell in love with the history of the place, or did you have like a personal connection? So again, just keep that in mind when answering this sort of question. So here I've written, I looked carefully at those offering the subject I was interested in. I took into account their teaching and examination methods, and I also wanted to choose somewhere away from my parents' home where I could learn about taking responsibility and being independent. I have also heard some really good things about the facilities and teaching from school friends who went there a year ahead of me. Okay, leaving aside your academic knowledge, what skills have you gained from being at college? So this is sort of a standard answer I've given. I have gained several skills, organising my workload for assignments, researching information, meeting deadlines, and working on joint projects with other students have been some of the most significant. So again, you're sort of wanting to focus on your reasons around what else you've gained at college. So this is how we're going to connect to later. It's about looking at those other skills that you've gained, not just that you've been academic, but actually that you've rounded off other transferable skills while you've been doing your A-levels. That's going to really appeal to employers, because anyone can get good A-level results, but what makes you stand out? And actually saying, well, I've got to organise my workload, I can research information, I know how to meet deadlines. That sort of thing is what you're going to use in the workplace. And again, it will make you stand out, and you've got that something extra. So now we're going to look at work history. Now again, if you're at school, you're probably not going to have a work history. We're going to look at that, but here's some things to keep in mind around your work history. So employers want to know what difference you can make if they offer you a job, so you must convince them of the following. How well you get on with your colleagues, your ability to see through tough assignments and projects through, what range of ideas you can contribute, how well you motivate others, and what kind of team member you are, and much, much more. There is a lot you have to get across in interviews, and it can seem quite daunting, but we're going to break it down, and we're going to tackle this. So, as I mentioned just in the last question, and we're looking at education, using, you've highlighted your organizational skills and, teamwork, etc., that you've got aside from just your education at college. So what I was referring to was, this is a transferable skill. And when it comes to answering interview questions, you've really got to think in terms of transferable skills. And the transferable skills are exactly what they say. They're a skill learned in a situation that you can apply to another. So, for example, if you can solve an engineering problem, you can apply that logic to a financial problem. Or if we look at that last example we just looked at, if you know how to manage or prioritize your workload, for like studying your exams, etc., you should be able to organize and prioritize deadlines for a project at work. Okay, it's about those transferable skills that you can say, well, actually, this is what I've been able to do. This is what makes me a good employee. So let's look at some questions. So first one is, I see you had a Saturday job at your local chemist while you were studying for your GCSEs. What did you learn from this job? Again, this isn't a question you can learn off by heart, because you need to adapt it to what you've learned in your jobs. But to give you an idea, I found it quite exciting because it was the first job I had ever had. I really enjoyed talking to customers, and I had a really helpful manager who took time to explain things about stock control and ordering and all that side of things. I ended up helping with the training when we took on new Saturday staff, and I took some extra days there during my school holidays. So again, what you're saying is, they really enjoy talking to customers, so they're good at dealing with customers, and you can see they learn about stock control and ordering, but you can also see they've helped with training of new staff, and they even took on some extra days. So you can see that's all hard working. So these sort of things that you just want to highlight in your questions. Okay, so next question. Your CV shows that you've done a lot of voluntary work, but not much paid employment. Why is that? Now, this question can leave you wondering if they're asking you to outline the benefits of voluntary work and if you can relate them to your current application. It can seem a bit daunting because it might also feel like it's suggesting you only work when you feel like it, but don't let that get to you. All you have to think of is, outline why your voluntary work matters and how it's relevant to this application that you're doing. So here's an example I've done. My voluntary work has been very varied, working in a hospital, for a local community youth group, and on an environmental project. At one point, I was working on all three at once and ended up with a 50-hour working week. I've learned so much about working in teams, negotiating and being well organised, and above all, it was the fundraising, promotional work and marketing that I could really see for my future career. Again, if you're quite young, if you're still in school, doing your A-levels, you're most likely you might not have any paid work, but you might have lots of voluntary work or work that you've done at school or for extracurricular teams or anything. So really, again, as we said at the beginning, sort of jot down what you've achieved and what you've done and really sort of reflect, because you will have done much more than you will think you have done. And again, you've just got to highlight all those transferable skills that you've learned. It's definitely not wasted time. Voluntary work is actually really great and you should make it work for you. Okay, next question. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you don't get on with a colleague, and how have you tackled this? So again, this is, you've got to stay positive with this sorts of questions. And when you get something like this, you've got to really spin it and, like I said, turn it on its head and sort of end on a positive. So to give you a rough idea, this is an example I've come up with. Yes, in the job before my current one, I really didn't hit it off with our head of public relations. We were both on the same level, so neither of us could pull rank to solve the problem. In the end, I grasped the nettle and persuaded him that we should have a talk and try to work on an effective strategy for us to work together. We really needed to, with me working in marketing. We had a pretty frank discussion, and although I can't say we ended up being the best of friends, we did gain more respect for one another's roles, and we certainly worked more productively together. I was really glad I had taken the initiative. Again, what this is showing is that you can deal with awkward situations, that you're willing to take the lead, that also you're good at negotiating and, dealing with difficult situations and sort of ending on that positive. So, again, it's really important to, if you get a question like that you can feel a bit, is that going to be a bit negative? Don't go negative and say, oh, well, this person was absolute awful to work with, never again. You've got to show that, actually you can resolve those sort of situations. Okay, so again, how do you cope if a project you're working on goes wrong? Again, before you answer this, think about a project that might have gone wrong. We're all humans. Nothing ever goes perfectly. You'll have an example of where something went wrong. Think about what you did to resolve it and, what you learned from it. And that is how you want to answer these questions. Again, ending on that positive one. Well, this is what I learned. This is how I fixed it. This is what I'm going to do next time if anything goes wrong. So this is how I've answered it. First, I assess the steps we need to take to minimize the damage limitation and deal with the immediate problem. Once the crisis is over, I analyze what went wrong and include colleagues in this discussion so we can pinpoint how we might avoid the same thing happening again. So again, just a little tip. Don't be in a hurry to reveal a weakness or a mistake if you feel much better concentrating on your good points. So again, with this one, don't be like, oh, well, I really messed up. Again, sort of do that. Well, we minimize the damage. I solved the problem. And then, with some colleagues, we sat down and we discussed what went wrong and what we can do to improve it next time. So yeah, don't feel like you have to be like, yes, it was all my fault. I messed up. Be much better to sort of show how you fixed it and how you worked with a team or whatever to make sure that you don't do that again. Is there anything you don't like about your current job? Now, again, go positive. So this is, again, it's one of those ones that you can be like, oh, well, don't go on a rant being like, oh, I hate this about my current job and this and this and this and this. What you need to do is, and there will all be parts of your job, this can be a spoiler for your future, There are parts to every job that everyone hates at some point. So you've just got to find a way to turn that to a positive. So if we look at this answer, I have to confess that I don't like some of the routine paperwork, especially since, in my opinion, a lot of it could be replaced with an on-screen system. I've developed the attitude of getting it done quickly so that it doesn't pile up or get behind. And that's the way I've tried to make it more palatable, even if I can't say it's exactly exciting. So again, what you're showing is that you can get on with those mundane tasks that you don't always like. So this is a really positive way to go, look, I don't like the routine paperwork. I think it could probably be replaced with an online system. But actually, what you're showing here is that I've got a can-do attitude. I'm going to get it done quickly, make sure it doesn't pile up, make sure it doesn't get behind. I stay on top of those like menial tasks, and I crack on and do it, because, you know, that's what you basically need to do. Okay, so let's have a little summary so far. So check your CV or application form to remind yourself of exactly what your employment history compromises. Don't discount experiences such as voluntary work or brief periods of work experience. This is especially important if you only have a brief job history anyway. Talk with your friends, managers, and colleagues about your faults and strengths. You'll find stuff you wasn't even aware of. And if they are bad, just don't tell anyone. Focus on your strengths and successes rather than flaws and failures. Ensure that you can use a range of situations to demonstrate your selling points. Don't build all your answers around one project or one incident. So again, this is what we're referring to what we did earlier at the beginning of the session. Note down lots of different tasks, projects, whatever you've worked on. So you've got lots of examples, a different variety. It mixes up. It shows that you've got, if you use one project, it looks like you can only do one thing over and over again. Whereas if you use lots of examples from different projects, it looks like you can do the same thing over and over again. And it just shows that actually you're really capable at doing that. So we're now going to be looking at questions around the company. So these are questions that are designed to look at about, you know, why do you want to work for them? So, like I said, companies want to know why you want to work for them. Therefore, whatever type of work you're chasing, do as much research as possible before your interview. Not only will you be more informed and prepared for their questions, but you also have a clearer idea of what you might want to ask them. So, where can I find out about the employers? So a good place to start would be the company or organization's website, other websites or blogs like Twitter, Glassdoor, or Facebook, a company brochure or product information. For example, if you're looking to go work at, you know, Apple, maybe look at, you know, all the different products. You know, you might have an iPhone, have a good look around it, any questions you might have. Local or national press. Recruitment agencies or career services or job centres, your university or college career centres, or your own experience with the company as a customer. For example, if you had an interview at Apple, have you ever been into an Apple store? What's your experience, you know, with them at the Genius Bar, for example? So let's crack on and look at some questions. What do you think of our company / organisation? So this question is sort of centred around retail sort of answer. So, for example, I've often popped in here for coffee and a sandwich. The place has always been bright and clean and staff have seemed friendly and efficient. I like the range of food you offer and the fact that you seem to be really good terms with so many of your customers. So again, this is like a retail answer, and the person is answering it with their own experience as a customer, sort of as their research. So again, we'll look at the same question, but this one is like a more general answer, where someone's probably researched. Well, you need to start with a person's research. Your website is really informative and has shown me a great deal about your products and your proposed future development. I'm very excited by the idea of working for a smaller company and my ideas can make a real contribution. Again, really obvious. This person's done their research by looking at the website, and they've sort of looked around, they've researched it's a small company, and they've worked that to, you know, make them work for them about how they can make their ideas make a real contribution. So, this question is, are we your first choice? Now, this can be quite daunting. But this is, and I've mentioned this before, you need to, these questions are aiming for, what these answers will have in common, is they show that the candidate has thought about who they're applying for. So, you know, they want to know why you're applying for them. And you also need to show you're really positive, and you need to answer with a positive comment. You need to show enthusiasm for that company or role. So keep these things in mind when you're answering these questions. They want to know that you've done your research, that you've thought about why you've applied to that company in particular, and they want to see that you're positive, you have enthusiasm for the company and role. So are we your first choice? Yes. Although I am applying to other similar firms. Had a really hoped to do a work placement with you after I met one of your managers at a recruitment event, and you seem to give people a lot of responsibility early on, and that really appeals to me. Now, again, like I said, this is really, really important because they might not be your first choice, but you always tell them that they are. So, for example, like I said, you won't be applying for just one company, but like I said, you can just sort of spin it and say, well, I am looking for similar firms, but you're my first choice because I really like your products, or I really want to work for your firm because I think there's a great chance for me to grow, etc., etc. So remember that positive enthusiasm. Okay, so again, I'm looking at one question here. I'm going to give two different answers, quite similar to what I did to the few examples ago. So, are you familiar with our products, services, and projects? Now, this answer is yes, I have looked. This is again showing that you've done your research, that you understand what they're saying and what they're selling. So, answer. I first found out about your local youth theatre projects during our local arts week last summer when I saw your production of Blood Brothers. I was interested in arts and theatre administration then, so I took the opportunity to talk to some of the cast and some of the staff backstage. Since then, I've followed up on several of your community projects. It shows that you've done the research, whether it's an example of actually seeing the show, you've gone and spoken to people who have worked there. This is what I've seen, this is what I've loved. Again, enthusiasm throughout, demonstration that you've done your research and that you actually know what you're talking about. Now, the next answer we're going to look at is a no answer, essentially. Now, of course, I'm hoping you've done your research, but if you haven't, you're going to have to be honest. Now, this is how I would answer this if I wasn't familiar. At present, I am not familiar with your product range as I would like to be, but I'm quick at assimilating knowledge and information, and I would certainly enjoy learning more about the products you supply. Now, like I said, this last answer is not ideal, but it's much better than making something up, because if you do say something along the lines of, yes, I think all your products are excellent, then you're also likely to get the follow-up answer of, like, what do you think is excellent about them, or what do you like best? And you're going to feel real sheepish if you then have to go, oh, well, actually, I don't know any of your products or services. Or even worse, if you start lying, it's going to be obvious that you're lying. So just be honest. Like I said, this answer isn't ideal because, like I said, hopefully you've done all the preparation, you've done all the research, you do know what you're talking about. But if you're not, this is a positive way to put a spin on it. Okay, the personal touch. So these are questions all based around your, you and what your interests are. So, as we briefly touched on, what your employer is looking for is not only can you do the job, but will you also fit culturally into their company? Pardon me. Therefore, they want to know everything about you. They will ask you dreaded questions such as, tell me about yourself. Now, I really hate these. I always get that absolute shock when I get this question. Like, my mind goes blank. I'm like, I don't have any interest. I don't do anything interesting. I'm only into cheese. So we're going to look at some of the examples of how to answer these sorts of personal questions and what are your hobbies? What are your interests? Tell me about yourself. So you don't do what I do, which is panic and talk about cheese for 5 minutes. So we're going to look at some of these answers, come up with some good answers to give, and then you're going to absolutely boss it. So before we can sort of answer this, we need to look up what are your achievements. So in job reviews, as well as on application forms, they will ask about your achievements. So it's worth putting in time considering yours. Be really aware of what your achievements are. Cast your net widely. Think hard about what has genuinely given you a real sense of achievement. Try not to think of examples that are always related to a work situation. If you're stuck, talk to a friend or a colleague. This will help your thoughts, get your thoughts flowing. Now, it is so hard to do this. For example, I don't know about you, but I can be really self-critical. I can be like, oh, well, I've not achieved anything, you know, what have I done? But you have. So we're going to spend 5 minutes now just preparing and looking at what your achievements are. And like I said, if you do get stuck and you really think, oh no, I've not achieved anything, it's absolute nonsense. Shut that voice down in your mind that's telling you that, because it's lying to you. And if you do get stuck, talk to a friend, talk to a teacher, talk to, you know, your family members, because they will see your achievements more clearly than you do. Okay, so this little task for 5 minutes. So what are your achievements? Now, this is, again, a nice little table to start noting down, and you can use this to answer other questions as well. It's about building up examples that you can use when answering questions. So down the side, I've just put when and where. So, you know, was it at school? Was it at work? Was it at uni? Was it through sports that you do? Was it through art, music, or drama? Was it through voluntary work, or other leisure activities, or through community work or politics, or through friends, family, and social events? So again, that is not an exhaustive list. Feel free to add things, and again, you might have more than one example at school, or, you know, if you're into musical drama, you might have a couple of examples. So again, that is just to give you that's just to guide you if you're struggling to think of when and where you might have achieved something. And again, the next column is you're looking at your achievement. So for example, if I was saying at work, I would say something I've achieved is working on this 6-week course with you guys, and what it's meant to me. It's been great reaching out to help people get it into work. So again, that's just a quick, it doesn't have to be too long. Just like I said, write down your achievement, what it's meant to you, because once you can start writing it, start thinking about it, it'll be a lot easier for you to then use those as examples in questions. So spend 5 minutes just doing this and looking over it. And again, whenever you're interviewing or whenever you're trying to, you know, list out your achievements, I do recommend spending 5 minutes on this just to keep them fresh in your mind. So now let's look at some questions, some like personal questions that like a job interviewer might ask you, and we're going to look at how we're going to answer them. So first up, it's got the dreaded, tell me something about yourself. So I've looked at this question twice. I've got a couple of answers for it. So this is quite a general answer. This is almost the beginning of your answer, by the way. This isn't where it ends. This is just how you'd open it. So perhaps I'll start by telling you why I've chosen to apply for you in the job at this stage in my career, and outline my experience in my current and previous jobs relates to this post. So then you would then go on to go, right, well, this is what I've done in X, Y, and Z companies, and this is why I've got these talents, I've got team building skills or communication skills, and this is how they relate to this job, and this is why I want to apply. So like I said, these couple of like sentences are almost your opening, and what's good about this answer is it's if you're not comfortable talking about yourself, tell me something about yourself. Well, this is why at this stage of my career I'm applying for you now. So it's just about turning the question around, so you can move on to that answering it in a more comfortable, work related, if that makes sense. So that's one example of how to answer that. And there's obviously hundreds of ways you can answer this. This is just to give you some ideas. So the next, so another way to answer this is maybe I should start by telling you one or two of my more unusual things that I have done, what I think I've learned from them, and how you would be useful to you if I were to be offered a post here. So for example, if you've just spent 5 minutes writing out your achievements, this is where you might then talk about them. So if someone goes, tell me something about yourself, you could go, right, what did I write down? Oh yes, I wrote how I helped put a school production of Macbeth on, and this is what I achieved, and this is what I've learned from it. So this is where you can talk about those things, and that's why it's so useful having that written down and thought about it. Do be careful though what your unusual hobby is. Make sure it's not too out there. For example, if you're into Morris dancing or witchcraft, maybe just keep that one to yourself. Another thing is also be careful that you don't answer, my hobbies are Snapchat or playing on my iPhone. Just pick something a bit different. You want to, it's fine to be, just expand your horizons. Show that, you've got interests. Okay, So another sort of personal question. What would you say is your greatest achievement to date? So think about what works for this answer. Think about what, you might change. I have to say it has been getting my pilot's license. I know it's not exactly an everyday skill for this office, but it was an ambition that I'd held for years, and it cost me a lot of money, but it was so exciting when I actually started flying solo, was able to take friends for flights. Again, think about what works for this answer and what doesn't. How would you answer this? Again, while you're listening or watching this, go through these and actually try writing answers for you using your examples to these questions. And again, just how would you answer it? How would you get across what you've achieved? Okay. Last one for this, personal questions. Give an example of your negotiating skills. So, it sounds like a small thing, but I share a house with 3 other people, and persuading people to do their fair share of the cleaning, tidying, and maintenance has really been an uphill struggle, especially when people are really restrained. I have developed a combination of being assertive and appreciative as soon as anyone helps out, and it seems to be working. So again, think about what works for this answer. So negotiating skills is, again, really key transferable skill. So other ways you could answer this is, you could say, if you've been volunteering or doing any fundraising, how do you persuade local shops or local people to contribute to your cause? So, in conclusion of this sort of section, be kind to yourself. Try not to be too critical, and actually try and recognize how much you've already done, and just acknowledge your achievements and your successes. It's really easy to be very self-critical, but like I said, shut that voice down. And if you're ever in a tight spot where you really can't think of anything, talk to friends, talk to family, talk to teachers, and talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, and go from there. But like I said, ignore that small voice at the back of your head that's always saying, but what have you really achieved? Because it's lying to you. Okay, last up, we are going to look at competency-based questions. So what is a competency-based question? As the name suggests, these questions are meant to test exactly that, your competence. When some interviewers may be more interested in your experience or previous qualifications, what a competency-based interviewer really wants to know is whether you have the right skills to take the position on. Candidates should explain why they made certain decisions, how they implemented these decisions, and why certain outcomes took place. The best way to answer these questions are to use the S.T.A.R. method or the S.T.A.R. method. Now, why would an employer use these competency-based questions or a competency-based interview? Well, because they are often used when previous experience in an industry is not seen as essential. For example, any entry-level or graduate position. They may also be used to practically test how candidates would react in given situations. So rather than concerning themselves with past achievements, they place emphasis on predicting how an individual would behave in certain scenarios. So tasks can range from oral or written communication to planning, organisation, or problem solving. So, skills that employers look for when recruiting. Some key competencies include. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it's pretty much captures most of the big ones. So they're going to be looking for teamwork. They're going to be looking at your responsibility. They're going to look at communication skills. They're going to look at decision making. They're going to look at leadership. They're going to look at problem solving. They're going to look at organisation, and last but not least, goal orientation. So what you can do to really help prep yourself for an interview is have a pre-prepared example of how you displayed that attribute before an interview. For example, think of an example of where you've worked as a team. Think of an example where you had responsibility. Think of a case where you had to use communication skills, decision making, etc. Use a wide variety of examples where possible, including during school or whether it's work or volunteering or anything in your daily life, anything in general. For example, when it comes to organisation, you could even use your cystic fibrosis and how you manage your medication and how you organise your day around that. That's an absolutely valid example to use. So again, it's up to you. You don't have to, but you don't have to shy away from that. Most importantly, though, and I have said this before, don't lie, because they will ask you questions about the subject, and any embellishments you've made will be quickly found out. Don't try and think on your feet too much for the same reasons I've just said. Again, trying to have examples connected with each of these sort of areas beforehand, and yeah, like I said, try and stick to the truth where you can. Okay, so although the type of question you are asked will depend entirely upon the role and industry you're applying for, there are some common themes which run through competency-based interview questions. So, for example, a competency-based interview question may start like, tell me a time when. Can you think of an example of how, when, or describe a way in which? So, for example, they could say, tell me a time when you've used negotiating skills to own a project, or can you think of an example of how you've shown leadership? Essentially, what the interviewer is looking for are practical examples of some key competencies, i.e., describe a way in which you demonstrated excellent leadership. Your examples can be from a previous job, they could draw from your education, or even relate to extracurricular pastime, such as sports, teams, or groups that you've been a part of. Honestly, cast your net widely. You can think of examples from anywhere. Again, look back to the task that we did at the beginning of this session, but also your achievements. You might have examples there that you can apply to these. So, now I mentioned before, now we know what a competency-based question is. We know what sort of areas are going to look at, for example, like team building, communication skills, etc. We sort of know how they ask them. Now the question is, how do we answer them? And I mentioned a couple of slides ago that we use S.T.A.R. or S.T.A.R. Now, if you're at school, you might be familiar with, especially if, when you're doing your English literature questions, you'll probably be familiar with something called PEEL, or P-E-E-L. I think there's a lot of varieties of them. It's like point, example, explain, link back. And S.T.A.R. is pretty much the adult version or the interview version of that. So what does S.T.A.R. stand for? Situation, task, action, result. So we're going to look at these individually now. So, situation. At this first stage, it is important to set the scene for your answer. With this said, it has to be concise as possible. For example, if the question is related to describing a situation where you've had to deal with a difficult team member, it is important to explain how you came to meet this person and exactly how they were difficult. Next up, task. You must mention that what is required of you. For example, if you're explaining a time you worked within a team, mention what the team task involved. 3, activity. You must describe what you actually did to highlight the strategic plan you took and the skills and personal attributes you used. It is important to make this section personal to yourself and what you did and how you went about doing it. Do not be afraid to go into detail at this point, as it helps the interviewer understand exactly what you carried out, your particular actions, and it shows that you calculated the consequences of those actions in order to take control of that particular situation. Last but not least, we have result. So, explain how the situation played out and the result of that. Mention what you personally accomplished and what you learned from the situation. It may be the case that you can apply it to a number of situations you eventually come across within the workplace. So, how do we tie these all together? Just a quick summary before we do that is the S.T.A.R. method has proved to be a valuable tool, and the structure can be adopted by recent graduates up to senior level managers. When answering competency-based questions, if you stick to these sort of steps, you will have an advantage against other candidates and heighten your chances of achieving your dream job. I can't stress this enough that, like I said, this really can be used from anyone from when they're starting out their career to those people who have been in their career 40 odd years. This is a method that can really see through many tough questions. So now we know what the S.T.A.R. method is. Let's look at an example of where we use it. So let's look at an example. I demonstrated my teamwork and leadership abilities when I headed up a group proposal in front of some key clients. We were asked to give a 1-hour presentation about how we could improve their hiring practices. After extensive competitor research and market trend analysis, we were able to put a competitive price together and present the features and benefits within the allotted hour. We went on to win the business. So let's keep our STAR method in mind. I demonstrated my teamwork and leadership abilities when I headed up a group proposal in front of some key clients. That is your situation. So next up, we're looking at what the task was. We were asked to give a 1-hour presentation about how we can improve their hiring practices. That's your task. Again, it's concise, it's short, it's dealt with in a sentence. Next up, we're looking at action. After extensive competitive research and market trend analysis, we were able to put a competitive price together and present the features and benefits within the allotted hour. That is the action they took place. So they've done research, they've done market trend analysis, and they managed to put a competitive price together. And what was the result? We went on to win the business. So again, it can be as concise, it sets it up, it answers the question, and it demonstrates and uses examples of how they went on to win. Right, so before I leave you with today, we're going to look at one last example, competency-based question. So, tell me how you go about solving a problem. Give me an example of a problem you've solved. So, again, you'll notice, tell me about how you, that is, you can tell it's going to be a competency-based question because of what we looked at earlier and how they sort of start. Something else to pick out. So it's a competency-based question. So you've got to start thinking about your STAR and your examples. And this one's about problem solving. Give an example of problem you've solved. So if we switch back to here, so that one was about problem solving. And again, tell me a time when. So straight off, this sort of competency-based question, you know what you've got to answer, and you've got your method on how to answer it. So before I show you my answer, I want you to have a few minutes thinking of an example of what you've used it and what you're doing. Okay. Feel free to pause it and write your own answer. Remember to use STAR. Think of it, look back at the examples and the tasks that we've done earlier, right again from the beginning of the session, as well as what we looked at with your achievements. And let's see what your answer is. This is one I've come up with. First of all, I tried to analyse the cases that have had led to the problem arising. Having done this, I tried to group them together, e.g., are they mainly with people, resources, lack of appropriate information, etc. At this stage, it is usually pretty clear where the root of the problem lies, and this makes it much easier to work on a solution that is likely to be successful. We recently had a lot of problems servicing customer call-out requests to a really satisfactory level. In an effort to provide excellent service, we had moved to booking really precise time slots. In retrospect, we have probably made these too short. We worked with our service team, our booking staff, and our customers to come up with something more flexible. It did involve looking at the problem from two very different perspectives. So, again, look at this question, look at what your answer is, what works, what doesn't work. Can you clearly see where we've used STAR? Where's the situation, where's the task, where's the action, and what was the result? Okay, thank you so much for listening to today's session. We have done a lot today. We have looked at how to answer questions around your education. We've looked at how to answer questions around your work experience, volunteering, etc. We've looked at how to answer questions about yourself and like personal questions and how to answer those. And we've also looked at what a competency-based question is and how to answer those, as well as the very important preparation, how to research a company, where to look, and how to do that.